Hey guys, Hidden here, back with a continuation, I guess, of the previous tutorial. I talked last time about jumping straight into the lines, which is what I'm going to do. Alright, so we have the two layers. It's not too important to, like I said, do the head in the last one. I can actually just lower the opacity down of this one to roughly the same amount, right? 28, 26, basically the same thing. I'm going to now select the G pen, which is the default tool for clip. I don't change my tools very much. I mentioned that at some point. Um, the G pen is a completely untextured, crisp line tool. That's what I prefer. But I see plenty of people using textured brushes out there, and that's totally fine. Um, Now, in lining, there is a little bit more to my method than previous, because sketching is just sketching. I'm not, you know, thinking about the curve of my wrist, right? I'm not thinking about getting full sections in one stroke because, like I said, I'm just sitting here sketching. But we're lining now, so I'm going to sit up straight or as straight as I can, get good posture, make sure my elbow is not resting on something. So I have full control of my arm, which occasionally I can rest my elbow. It just depends. But that's something you need to be thinking about. Like, for example, say I want to do this hair right here in one stroke, which I do. I'm going to lift my elbow up and then just follow the full curve of my wrist. Just one big flick and I'm done, right? Well, now we have another curve here. I'm going to do the same thing. Being um, mindful that if it overlaps like that, that's not that big of a deal because I can just come in here and clean that up. Um, so I'm going to do that again, just one big flick, and you can already see how easy and quick it is to line when you have, I wouldn't say good posture because I'm literally just sitting in my chair cross-legged and hunched over, but just not laying back and I'm less relaxed but still comfortable, because being comfortable is actually pretty important too, because if you're not comfortable you're not going to want to draw. So I'm just going to keep going through the hair. I have my elbow resting generally on smaller spots where I'm not really curving my wrist too much. I will rest my elbow. um, but for those long, big strokes, like even right here, I kind of want a longer stroke. So I picked up my elbow right there. Um, Also, keeping your hand on Control Z is pretty important. If you're feeling extra lazy and you just, I don't know, want to put your hand in your lap to keep it warm or whatever, you can go up here to the top and do the undo button that way. But I would recommend getting used to the idea of keeping your offhand, if you're right-handed, on the Control Z. If you're left-handed, I would go into the key bindings and create a shortcut that is comfortable for you. Um, Something I haven't talked about previously is my equipment that I'm using. I'm using a Huion, I want to say GT190S. I think that's the model. It's an older model from like 2012, maybe even older than that. It is a tablet or graphics monitor, a graphics tablet screen. I don't know what you call them, but I can see the screen and I'm drawing on the screen. Um, I'm 100% sure that if you can get used to just drawing on one of those little tablets, the ones that you put on your desk, then you'll be just fine with that. It took me, when I first got this, like a whole year to get comfortable drawing on it. And that's just coming from traditional to digital. So I think a lot of people misunderstand the transition from traditional to digital as being, oh, I don't have this awesome equipment. No, you're just going to go through that no matter what you have. You just have to force yourself through it. Um, a lot of the times your equipment really isn't the issue. Sucks to say, but yeah, no, most of the time you're the issue. Um, don't like, but it's fixable, right? Sometimes equipment isn't, right? Sometimes you can't afford to get equipment or to get that graphics monitor that I'm talking about, or even something better, which I need to upgrade my stuff, but that's just because this stuff's old and the screen has scratches and whatnot. Either which way you have it, there is okay. I will say that there is clearly an advantage to having more expensive equipment, but it's not necessary for building up, practice and skill. I mean, everything that I've talked about, most everything, you could easily apply it to traditional drawing. And if that's all you have access to, then yeah, do that. Because the most important thing at the end of the day, and I mentioned this previously, is you just need to be drawing. Because that's what's going to make you improve the most. Yeah, sure, looking at other people's work, studying how they do it, that'll help, but nowhere near to the degree as you actually just getting out there and just drawing. That's, sorry, that's the most important thing. So with that being said, I'm going to go back to talking about what I'm doing here. I'm being very mindful to close in all my gaps. So basically, I'm trying to make sure that I'm not leaving anything wide open. Now you can see right here in the eyes, I did leave little gaps here and here. That is kind of a stylistic choice. Obviously coming from more manga style, anime style stuff. And you'll see how I correct that later when I'm coloring. And that's the whole purpose of keeping everything very closed, is that coloring, it makes it a lot easier to be able to just select big, huge areas and then be like, all right, I want this whole area to be colored this. And you'll see that later when I get to it. I'm trying to get this. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. Hopefully I can get this done in the next 7 minutes, because that's how much my timer says I have left. So don't mind me. Like pretty much everything that I said previously about you keeping your elbow elevated, and just having decent posture and being able to like flick your wrist, right? Okay, here's a good example. I can't flick my, well, I just did it, but anyways, it's harder for me to flick my wrist this direction than it would be if I just flipped the canvas. Oh, actually, maybe rotating it. All right, so yeah, I could flick my wrist that way easier, but I got it, so I'm not going to worry about it. So I guess what I'm saying is just be mindful of the direction your canvas is and whether or not it facilitates the direction you want to flick your wrist in. Obviously, if you're left-handed, the directions that are going to be comfortable for you to flick your wrist in are going to be opposite to mine. But I'm sure left-handed people understand that. They've probably had to deal with that all of their life. But anyways, so like I said, everything I do in terms of lining is all about, like I said, keeping the lines crisp, clean. Right there, you can see that a little bit. I do tend to clean up the lines as best as I can as I'm going, because if I don't, I'll forget about it. Or I'll just be at the end and too lazy to fix it. So another thing that I'm doing here that I need to mention is you can see me, it looks like I'm using an eraser tool a lot here. So like if I wanted to erase, say this, I'm not actually erasing it. I'm pushing C on the keyboard, which is changing the color that I'm using to transparent. That's something Clip Studio can do. I don't know if other programs can. I know a couple other can, but I don't know the key bindings for all of them and how that works. But that's what I'm doing now in here. And that's just something I picked up that makes things a little bit quicker for me. So just moving on, a lot of the lining process for me is kind of brain dead because everything's already been, plotted out for me, and it's pretty straightforward from here. There could be like little subtle details that I might add, that I will think about, and as I get to those, I will definitely point them out. I guess here's kind of one. You can see where her waistline enters the belt area. That wasn't very defined, so I'm going to take the time out to try to define that a little bit here. Kind of like that. So that's a big... So I'm going to rotate the canvas here to, yet again, facilitate the bend of my wrist and just the comfort of my arm to move in that direction, and then set it back to normal. I really, really regret not doing these hands a little bit more, defined, and I know I mentioned that while I was sketching that I probably should define them a little bit better, but some of these lessons have to be drilled into your head for years before they catch on, and that's just one that I guess I haven't quite gotten to. I'm gonna put like some kind of like, I don't know, seam right here. I don't know if it would be like a button spot or anything, but I like the way that looks, so I'm gonna do that. Not going to detail the belt too much. I'm probably just gonna do this, right? So you can see where I added a thicker line and a thinner line. That's just obviously, if you're looking at it this direction, a cube, right? If you're looking at a cube, you're going to see this face and not this face. Well, if it's a really thin cube, like this belt is, you're only going to see this side and not that side. So that was my thought process there. Going to move on down to the crotch. A little bit of the hip region. I'm actually, you can actually see me avoiding the hands because I'm like, oh god, I did not properly define those. But even now, this is a good example for, just not caring so much that it stops you. So I'm just going to add some knuckles there and call it a day, even though that doesn't quite look right to me. I know it would take me longer to sit here and figure all of that out than it would be for me, or would for me to just do that and then move on, in the time it takes me to draw that, I could probably draw or to figure that out. It's possible that I could have drawn a whole nother picture, and the amount of practice that I would have gotten from drawing that whole other picture is better than getting this one hand in this one who cares about image, I'm not saying you shouldn't care about your art. You just shouldn't care so much about your art that it keeps you from drawing, That might not be intuitive, but just don't be afraid. That's all I'm saying, is like, who cares if you make a mistake? I certainly don't. And who cares if there's mistakes in the final product, So, like I said, it's about taking that feeling that you have and then just saying, hey, who cares, I would rather draw than not draw, And that thought that I'm having there is all, like, paying any kind of heed to it. All that's going to do is keep me from drawing. So I'm not going to listen to it, and I'm just going to keep going. And that is very, very hard to overcome, but very important. And the sooner you do just stop caring so much about whether your stuff looks good or not, the more you'll draw and the happier you'll be. Now, granted, like I said, you should always be looking to improve, and yeah, you should put effort into it, but don't be so overcritical of yourself that, like, I'm a record now, but don't be so overcritical that you just don't draw. That's the main takeaway here. I kind of actually like the previous line for the shoulder here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow that and just use that to break up some of that negative space. Negative space being just empty white void spaces, which you'll see me like use seams to do that a lot. I'll use like seam lines to the clothing and stuff to really break up that negative space. Oh crap, I went way over. All right, well, I don't know how long I went over, but hopefully not too long.